Hi, Tootsie Carlson here. Like many music fans in the world, I absolutely love the Beatles. And anytime any new Beatles content comes out, I pretty much have to get my hands on it. And that's why I wanted to check this out. This is the Beatles documentary Get Back, which was directed by Peter Jackson. This was originally released on Disney+, but now it has a proper Blu-ray release. I'm going to unbox this release and share my opinions. Cover art there featuring the young and the older Beatles from those old album covers. I like the way that looks. There's our spine text, top of the backing card, close-up of the backing card, spine text, bottom, other side. Underneath the backing card, great shot of the band from the rooftop concert. Let's see what we get inside this box. This folds open and it actually gives you this nice piece of panoramic artwork there, overhead shot of Ringo's drums. Really like how that turned out. We even get some bonus art cards inside this flap here. It is a little hard to get these in and out. You got John, Paul, George, and Ringo. Right here we got a nice shot of the band together. Get Back Part 1, got some great photographs from the event. There's the Part 1 disc. I did notice that these actually have like UK content ratings on them, not the American ones, so I'm not totally sure if you consider this an import release or what. Here's Part 2. Picture of the disc. And lastly, Part 3. I do like how each of the discs has unique art depending on what that disc features. Like disc 3 has got the rooftop concert. And then in the back there's a picture of the calendar that they use throughout the film to depict the events. Directed by Peter Jackson, The Beatles Get Back is a 3-part documentary series that takes audiences back in time to the band's intimate recording sessions. The documentary showcases the warmth, camaraderie, and creative genius that defined the legacy of the iconic foursome and is compiled from 60 hours of unseen footage shot in January 1969 under the supervision of Michael Lindsay Hogg and his director of photography, Tony Richmond, and more than 150 hours of unheard audio, all of which has been brilliantly restored. Also featured for the first time in its entirety is the Beatles' last live performance as a group, the unforgettable rooftop concert on London's Savile Row, as well as other songs and classic compositions featured on the band's final 2 albums, Abbey Road and Let It Be. 3-day set includes Part 1. The band gathers at Twickenham Film Studios to rehearse for a concert. Part 2. Rehearsals continue at Apple Studios and the mood lifts. Part 3. The Beatles perform on the roof of the Apple offices. It's no secret that I'm a fan of the Beatles, and the band's final feature film, Let It Be, which came out around the same time as the album of the same name, was a look into the band and how they were sort of falling apart during these Get Back sessions. Ironically, the project that was supposed to unite the band is what ultimately drove them apart and is pretty much what ultimately led to the dissolution of the band. That said, though, that documentary had not been available for years, supposedly because the band didn't like how they'd been depicted in it. But director Peter Jackson, known for making movies like the Lord of the Rings films, as well as the 2005 remake of King Kong, stepped into the arena to try his hand at compiling this footage into something a little more thorough. For the most part, he absolutely succeeds here. This is a great fly-on-the-wall look at the Get Back sessions and everything that pretty much happened behind the scenes, the good and the bad alike. This movie has some great uplifting moments and some excellent music, but it's not afraid to depict the less than stellar environment as well. I mean, there's a few scenes where you can tell all of the Beatles that aren't John are getting a little fed up with Yoko Ono's antics, for one. And then you even have things like, the other members of the bands and their wives and children coming into the studio. You have a lot of behind the scenes bickering. I mean, there's a scene in this movie where George Harrison literally quits the band. I mean, he ultimately comes back, but it just gives you an idea of how sour the relations were between the band members while these sessions were going on. A lot of the material heard here would, of course, end up on things like the Let It Be album and the Abbey Road album. The Abbey Road album, of course, would be their last recorded album, whereas Let It Be was recorded earlier but came out later after the band had broken up. And it's just an all-around great look at this period of the group. We get to see the rooftop concert, and of course a lot of random special guests that pop their head in. For instance, Billy Preston is at a lot of the sessions, who of course would play during the rooftop concert. And you even have Alan Parsons as one of the Apple Records engineers working on the album. He of course would go on to work on Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, and then you would have his own group, the Alan Parsons Project. Another person behind the scenes here is Glenn Johns. Glenn Johns would go on to be a noteworthy album producer in his own right outside of these sessions, including doing the first album for the Eagles in 1972. So it's an all-around who's who of great musical names, the Beatles doing what they do best, but a movie that's not afraid to show that this was a band that was coming apart at the seams. I won't lie, the film is not perfect. It's very, very long. It did struggle to keep my attention at a few points in time. There is a nice sort of prologue at the beginning of part one that shows everything the band did leading up to these sessions, and that's an interesting watch, kind of like a reintroduction to the band. But at the same time, I don't think this is really going to appeal to anyone outside of the most diehard of Beatles fans. Fortunately, I know there are a lot of you out there. I had a great time watching Get Back. Again, not a perfect film. I do seriously wonder if we could get an even shorter version of this, but that's still more comprehensive than the 1970 Let It Be film. But as is, I'm certainly not going to complain about what we've got. Unfortunately, the picture quality in this release is not good. The image has very clearly been processed, noise reduced, scrubbed of any detail to the point that it just looks stale and lifeless. This is what film should not look like. I mean, there are some scenes where the colors are pretty vibrant due to the capacity of the Blu-ray format, but it's just not a good-looking disc. Even when we see close-ups, there's like no fine detail whatsoever. I mean, everyone in this movie, their faces look like someone went over them with a floor buffer. Something shot on film should never look like this. By comparison, if you go watch the 1970 Let It Be film, which is also streaming on Disney Plus now, I mean, it looks like it's unrestored, but it has all the original film grain and detail intact, so I really wish they'd kept it that way. There are no bonus features included here, although we do get those art cards that I showed you earlier, so that's something, and of course the book-style packaging. So, whether you should buy this release or not really depends on who you are and how big of a Beatles fan you are. If you already have Disney Plus, you can stream the movie on there. I mean, I think I paid about $50 for this release, which is not a horrible price, but is maybe a tad overpriced for what some discs go for. Again, if you're a diehard Beatles fan, definitely pick this up, but if you just want to watch it on Disney Plus, that's fine too. I really wish they would have done a better job with the picture quality and not digitally noise reduced and scrubbed away all the detail, because that just really hurts the look of this. That said though, in terms of information and everything that goes on, it's absolutely a revelation into the lives of the Fab Four at the time, and for that reason, it's definitely worth watching if you're a fan. How about you? What do you think of the Get Back documentary from the Beatles? Did you pick up this release yet? Did you stream it on Disney Plus? Comment down below and let me know what you think. Also, remember to subscribe to this channel for more content. I'm always posting new videos, and make sure you give it a like if you found it helpful. I'm Taylor T. Carlson. See you next time.